In episode 11, titled Correlation and Association, Pearson versus Spearman versus No Relationship, the focus is measuring relationships without falling into the classic trap of confusing association with cause and effect. DataX scenarios often describe variables that move together, and the exam rewards the learner who can quantify that relationship while still being disciplined about what the result does and does not imply. Correlation measures patterns of co-movement, not mechanisms, which means it can guide exploration and feature selection, but cannot, by itself, prove that one variable produces changes in another. This matters in exam questions because distractors frequently try to push you toward causal language when the prompt only supports association. When you keep the boundaries clear, you can choose the right correlation measure and interpret it in a way that is both technically correct and professionally responsible. The goal in this episode is to make correlation selection feel like a quick, reliable judgment call you can make from scenario cues. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to the DataX books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Correlation is best described as the strength and direction of association between two variables, usually expressed on a scale that ranges from -1 through 0 to +1. A positive correlation means that as one variable increases, the other tends to increase as well, while a negative correlation means that as one increases, the other tends to decrease. A correlation near 0 suggests no linear association, but that does not necessarily mean there is no relationship of any kind, which becomes important when data behaves nonlinearly. Strength is about how tightly the points cluster around the pattern, and direction is about whether the pattern slopes upward or downward. The exam often tests whether you can interpret these ideas in context, such as recognizing that a strong correlation can still be non-causal, or that a weak correlation can still carry operational meaning depending on the decision. When you treat correlation as a descriptive measure of association, you are less likely to overpromise what it can do. Pearson correlation is the standard choice for linear relationships between numeric variables, meaning it measures how well a straight line captures the association. It assumes the variables are numeric in a meaningful way and that the relationship is reasonably linear because Pearson is sensitive to departures from linearity. In practical terms, Pearson is answering the question, do these two numbers move together in a way that looks like a straight line trend, which fits many engineering and business measurements? The exam may describe variables like time, cost, latency, or counts, and if the prompt suggests a straight line pattern, Pearson is often the correct selection. A common distractor is to use Pearson whenever data is numeric, even when the pattern is clearly not linear or when the presence of extreme values makes the measure unstable. DataX rewards the learner who chooses Pearson when linearity is plausible and who avoids it when the scenario suggests a different kind of relationship. Spearman correlation is useful for monotonic patterns and ranked data, and it is often the better choice when the relationship is ordered but not necessarily linear. Monotonic means that as one variable increases, the other tends to move in one direction overall, even if the rate of change varies, and the points do not fall near a straight line. Spearman works by looking at ranks rather than raw values, which makes it more robust when the measurement scale is ordinal or when the relationship is nonlinear but consistently increasing or decreasing. In scenario terms, Spearman is a good fit when you are comparing rankings, scores that represent order more than distance, or relationships that curve but still move in a consistent direction. The exam may hint at this through words like ranked, ordered, or through descriptions of patterns that increase quickly at first and then level off. When you pick Spearman in those cases, you are matching the measure to the meaning of the data and the shape of the relationship. A key concept for exam success is recognizing that zero correlation can hide nonlinear relationships, which means no correlation is not the same as no relationship. Pearson correlation can be near zero when the relationship is curved, U-shaped, or otherwise nonlinear, even if the relationship is strong in a practical sense. For example, a variable might increase with another up to a point and then decrease, which can cancel out linear association and produce a near-zero Pearson result. The exam may describe a relationship that changes direction or that behaves differently across ranges, and a near-zero correlation in such a case should not be interpreted as proof of independence. This is one reason why exploratory data analysis and visualization thinking matter, even when the exam does not require actual plots. The best answer in these scenarios often acknowledges that correlation is measuring a specific kind of relationship, and that additional analysis may be needed to detect nonlinear patterns. If you remember that correlation near zero can occur in nonlinear systems, you will avoid overconfident conclusions. Outliers are another major factor because they can distort Pearson correlation more than Spearman correlation, and the exam expects you to be aware of that sensitivity. Pearson correlation is influenced by extreme values because it uses raw magnitudes, so a few unusual points can create the appearance of a strong relationship or hide a real one. Spearman correlation is less sensitive because it uses ranks, meaning an extreme value does not have disproportionate influence beyond its relative ordering. The exam may mention unusual spikes, rare events, or data quality concerns, and those clues should make you cautious about measures that are sensitive to extremes. A distractor might push Pearson because it is the most familiar, but if outliers are prominent in the scenario, Spearman or robust approaches are often more defensible. This is not about declaring Pearson bad, but about choosing it only when the data conditions make it trustworthy. When you practice noticing outlier cues, you will choose correlation measures that match the scenario's risk profile. Confounders can create misleading correlations, and DataX questions often reward recognizing when a correlation might be driven by a third variable rather than a direct association. A confounder is a variable that influences both variables you are measuring, creating a correlation that is not truly about the relationship between the pair of interest. In business and operational contexts, time is a common confounder because many metrics trend upward or downward over time, creating correlations that disappear when you control for temporal effects. Another confounder pattern is segmentation, where two variables appear correlated in the aggregate, but the relationship changes or reverses within subgroups, which is a form of misleading aggregation. The exam may hint at confounding through language about seasons, campaigns, releases, or population differences, and the best answer often involves acknowledging that correlation does not account for confounders on its own. This is also where the correlation is not causation principle becomes more than a slogan, because it is a practical warning about how correlations can mislead. When you recognize confounders, you interpret correlation cautiously and avoid causal claims the scenario does not justify. Choosing between Pearson and Spearman often comes down to distribution behavior and measurement scale, and the exam expects you to reason from those cues rather than from habit. If the variables are numeric with meaningful distances and the relationship is plausibly linear, Pearson is usually appropriate. If the variables are ordinal, rank-based, or the relationship is monotonic but not linear, Spearman is often the better choice. If outliers dominate, or if distributions are heavily skewed, Spearman can provide a more stable description of association than Pearson. The exam may not use the word monotonic, but it may describe consistent ordering or a relationship that increases without implying a straight line. When you see those cues, you should lean toward Spearman because it respects order without demanding linearity. This selection logic is exactly what DataX rewards because it shows you understand what the measures assume and what they summarize. Magnitude interpretation requires caution because correlation values that look small can still matter depending on the domain and the decision. In noisy systems or complex social and operational environments, even modest correlations can be meaningful signals when combined with other features or when the cost of missing the signal is high. Conversely, a large correlation can be unhelpful if it is redundant or if it reflects a confounder rather than a useful relationship. The exam may present a correlation and ask how to interpret it, and the best answer often acknowledges that magnitude must be interpreted relative to context, variability, and decision needs. A correlation of 0.2 might be meaningful in a high-variance behavioral dataset, while it might be trivial in a controlled engineering process, and the scenario context guides that judgment. DataX rewards the learner who does not treat correlation magnitudes as universal labels like strong or weak without context. When you interpret magnitude as decision-relevant rather than as an absolute rating, you make more defensible choices. Significance interpretation is another common exam trap, especially when sample sizes are huge, because with enough data, even tiny correlations can become statistically significant. Statistical significance tells you that the observed association is unlikely to be zero under the null, but it does not tell you that the association is practically important. In large samples, p-values can become very small for effects that are too small to matter, which can mislead learners who treat significance as proof of impact. The exam expects you to recognize this and to avoid overreading significance when the effect size is small. A professional interpretation connects p-values to magnitude, confidence intervals, and decision stakes, rather than treating significance as a green light to act. This is especially relevant in modern data settings where large datasets are common and where the risk is acting on statistically detectable but operationally irrelevant patterns. When you hold that distinction, you will choose answers that reflect mature reasoning about what significance does and does not mean. Correlation also connects directly to multicollinearity and feature redundancy risks, which is a practical modeling concern that DataX scenarios often include. Multicollinearity occurs when features are highly correlated with each other, which can make some models unstable and can make interpretation of individual feature effects unreliable. Even when a model can handle correlated features, redundancy can waste complexity, increase noise sensitivity, and reduce generalization if the correlations shift in production. The exam may describe a situation where several predictors appear to carry the same information, and the best response often involves recognizing that correlation analysis can identify redundancy before modeling. This is not about eliminating all correlation, but about managing it so the model remains robust and explainable. In practice, this can mean choosing a subset of features, combining features thoughtfully, or selecting modeling approaches that are less sensitive to collinearity. When you connect correlation to multicollinearity, you demonstrate the kind of integrated thinking the exam rewards. Correlation matrices are a common conceptual tool for pruning features before modeling, and the exam expects you to understand the purpose even if you never compute one during the test. A correlation matrix summarizes pairwise associations among many numeric variables, which helps you see clusters of redundancy and potential proxy relationships. In feature pruning, the goal is often to reduce redundancy, simplify the model, and improve interpretability while maintaining predictive power. The exam may frame this as preparing for modeling, reducing complexity, or avoiding unstable predictors, and correlation matrix thinking fits those goals. A common trap is removing features solely because they correlate with the target, which can be valid signal, while ignoring that the bigger stability issue may be features correlating strongly with each other. The best approach is to use correlation information to remove or consolidate redundant predictors, while still respecting the objective and evaluation process. When you think of a correlation matrix as a map of redundancy, you can answer pruning questions with greater clarity and avoid distractors that confuse correlation with causation. A useful anchor to keep this episode's reasoning stable is that Pearson is straight line, Spearman is ordered movement, and both are limited. Pearson is best when the relationship is linear and numeric magnitudes matter, while Spearman is best when the relationship is monotonic or rank-based and you want robustness to nonlinearity and outliers. Both measures describe association, not causation, and both can miss patterns if the relationship is complex or if confounders dominate the dataset. The anchor also reminds you that a correlation near zero does not automatically mean no relationship, because nonlinear and segmented relationships can hide behind a zero value. Under exam pressure, this anchor helps you choose the correct measure and interpret results without drifting into overconfident claims. It also supports feature selection reasoning by reminding you that correlation is a tool for redundancy detection, not a final explanation of why patterns exist. When you keep the limitations in view, you will choose answers that are technically correct and professionally cautious. To conclude Episode 11, describe one relationship type in plain language and then choose the right metric, because this is the fastest way to make selection reflexive. You might describe a straight line increase where numeric distance matters, which points toward Pearson correlation as the appropriate summary. You might describe a consistent ordering where the relationship curves or where ranks matter more than magnitudes, which points towards Spearman correlation as a better fit. Or you might describe a relationship that changes direction across ranges, which should make you cautious about interpreting a near-zero correlation as no relationship, and should prompt consideration of nonlinear analysis. Then, once you have chosen the metric, state what it does and does not imply, especially that it does not prove cause and effect. If you can do that smoothly, you will be able to handle DataX questions about association, correlation, and feature redundancy with calm, disciplined reasoning rather than guesswork. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.